Hello, my name is Janelle, and I am the founder of JS Self Care. Welcome to Journey to Self Care with special guest Angel from When Angels Do. If you could introduce yourself and just explain to us what your journey to self care look like.
Well, I'd like to say thank you so much for having me. And my name is Angelicia. I am the founder and CEO of When Angel Speaks. And what that means is I am here to be that inspirational global voice to help you shift into your atmosphere of breaking free of the silence so that you may be able to step into your breakthrough.
Thank you so much. So, Angel, what prompted you to start your journey? Because when we talk about a journey, what we went from one place and then got to another place. And through that could have been pain, we could have been happy, unhappy with ourselves, or happy with ourselves. So, what started your journey?
Oh, wow. So, what started my journey is 5 years ago. I was actually tired of being tired. I told God, what is it that you want me to do? Where is it that you want me to go? Because I'm just tired. I was miserable. I was so unhappy with myself. I didn't like anybody. I didn't like being around anybody. Just all of that and above, just so much. And I just told God I was just tired. And so from there, after the eighth time of leaving a toxic marriage of domestic violence, is when I began my journey into self healing, self caring, and be able to know how to self love because all of that was in me instead of looking around me for it.
So, when you say you were in a toxic relationship, domestic abuse, what did that look like basically? What was that? If you don't mind sharing with us.
Yeah, I don't mind sharing. So, what it looked like, it was physical, it was mental, it was emotional, and it was spiritual. So I have four children. I have a total of five children, but I have four children with my last children's father, who I was married to for 20 years, and we had been together for 6 years prior to the 20 years. But I was with him for quite some time, and a lot of the days was I was nothing. I was a failure. He would curse me out. I would work all day, and I was actually the breadwinner. And I would come home, and his life just was because he was so broken. It was full of him drinking, you know, taking pills, just doing a lot of things where he was more doing more damage to himself than trying to help himself. There were times that we would have yelling matches and stuff because I was trying to find a way to get him to understand he was really making the worst out of me instead of the best out of me. It affected our children. There were times where child protective services would get involved. It was just a lot of toxic. But I had to learn from that a lot of times when we're still broken, we're choosing these type of relationships, okay? So we're choosing these type of relationships because we're broken. We're broken, and how can you help someone else heal when you're not even healed yourself? How can they love you like you need to be loved and respect you when you have no respect for yourself? You don't even love yourself. And the same thing with my children's father. Although he was the abuser, he went through a lot of things that he never dealt with from his childhood. And the same thing with me. I've learned dealing with people, a lot of things that we go through stems from things that we kept, as we call, family secrets from our childhood.
Can you explain what those family secrets? Because you did state that you attracted this type of man. Did you see abuse when you were growing up? What was your childhood like?
I did. So when I was a baby, I was told by my family that my father killed my mother. So I lost my mother at the hands of my father. So that was a domestic violence situation. From there, at the age of 10, by the time my sister and I were 10, that's when the abuse, I acknowledge it was abuse. We were always told, spare the rod, spoil the child. and we were a family that grew up as Baptists, and what goes on in the house stays in the house. So imagine you have this family where your grandmother has always been a school teacher, and so everyone looked up to her. Our family was very dedicated into the church. So in this small town where we had streets named after our family, we were very well known. So in those eyes back then, because everything was so tradition, nobody saw anything wrong. They felt as if you were being beat on, that was just a lesson learned. But they didn't understand the things that were going on in the home were actually abusive. So by the age of 10, as I stated, my sister and I used to witness my sister being beat with belt buckles, sticks. I remember one time when a eating table back then where your grandparents sit had a little table in front of them and sitting in front of the sofa because they wanted to watch the wooden TV, the box wooden TV, and eat their dinner. I remember one time because my sister had stolen from a teacher, she was a table, the little eating table was thrown at her. My sister was always called ugly. I was the one that they always called beautiful, but at the same time, we both were beaten and all the time. Just any little thing we did, we would be grounded for 6 weeks, couldn't go anywhere. And one of my uncles, he was in the military, he's a retired military veteran. He would come home anytime he had the opportunity to come home, and my sister and I started becoming very rebellious. Me, I was more rebellious because I felt like I wasn't grasping anybody's attention. And so it got to a point where one day my uncle came home and he beat me so bad. I had black bruises on the back of my legs. It was at a point I used to put Charmin tissue in the back of my pants because the beatings were so excruciating. I used to jump up under the bed because we were always getting whipped with switches and belts and just the really thick belts back then. And then there were times we would get put into the tub of water and be rubbed down in alcohol after we've been beaten with switches and stuff. And so I don't see how people feel like, well, it taught you well. It didn't teach me well. It really scarred me when I was a young child. And I remember a time where I started running away from home. I used to see my grandfather come over and jump on my grandmother all the time. They were arguing whose fault it was that my mother was killed. Neither one of them wanted to take responsibility. They faulted each other. They faulted each other so much, even down to my father. He was only charged with manslaughter. I felt they didn't take domestic violence as serious as they do now. So he was charged with manslaughter instead of actual murder. And to my knowledge, my mother was pregnant with one of our siblings as well when she was murdered. But at the same time, it wasn't a law into effect where when you kill a person, and you kill an unborn, that's two murders. But that's not how he went to prison. So they argued all the time. My auntie, she would come over and, she went through her abusive marriage as well. And I noticed my uncles, they could never keep a girlfriend. So from there, I remember one day when I ran away, the first guy that I started dating when I started running away from home, my other uncle was a police officer for the city we lived in. And he came and he cursed out the people, my boyfriend at that time, his family, stating he was going to take them to jail because they were holding me when they, I guess basically they didn't have any rights to have me in their home, and I was reported as a runaway, a missing person. So instead of him trying to get to the root of it, he turned around and took me to a youth detention home where I stayed there, I would say 2 weeks, nearly a month. And that made me even worse. It was like I turned into this demon, just hating, just in a rage, for everybody. I couldn't stand anybody because nobody listened. My grandmother took me to the church for counseling, and it was like she had already premeditated to the pastor. I was a child that was rebellious. So the first thing the pastor wanted to know, what was my problem? The problem that he needed to understand was not me. There was a problem. The root of the problem was in the house of what was being done to me and my sister. And so I muted my voice because I felt like this is a family church. He's not going to take my side. he's going to take my grandmother and my uncle's side. Nobody's going to listen to me. Even when I went to the school, nobody listened to me. They knew something was going on, but they didn't listen to me. I remember my first day back at school, and my step grandmother, my grandfather's wife, um, I never cared for her because I used to pee in the bed all the time. And, her thing is, we bought you everything, we took care of you all. But she was emotionally and mentally abusive as well, because I remember her cursing me out because I peed in the bed all the time when I would go over to my grandfather's house. Nobody knew why I was peeing in the bed. They just thought I had a large bladder. But I remember that day that I was walking through the high school gym, going to exchange classes, and she passed by me and she cursed at me, calling me fast and hot in the tail, and I need to get myself together. My grandmother is doing the best that she can. That's all I heard. She's doing the best that she can. How can you do the best you can by beating on us? How can my uncles feel they're doing the best they can when they beat us until we would pee in our clothes and stuff? Like literally beat us. Like my skin was hard. I would go for weeks with black and purple bruises, and I would do something else that would trigger him. And if he was still in town, that's another beating. Or when he comes into town, he's beating me for something that my grandmother said I did in the past. It was always something. And he intimidated us with shaking with his chest. He was like muscular built, and he would make his chest go up and down. And he always intimidated me and my sister. So we were really scared of him when we were coming up. But even on my step grandmother, we had nobody. The school knew something was wrong. My grades were dropping. I had to go to night school and day school in order to see myself graduate. So they knew what was going on, but it was a town where nobody would say anything. Nobody would get in each other's business other than to defend each other. And back then, Child Protective Services wasn't strict like they are now. Because when I started running away from home and I wouldn't go back, I never saw my grandmother go to court. She just released her rights to me. And basically, I think by the age of when I was 16, I was considered like independent. Emancipation Proclamation, whatever they do when you're able to just live on your own. So I was living on the streets. She took me off her insurance. I had no insurance, none of that. It was a lot done to me. Going back to 12 years old, um, I remember there was one time where someone told my grandmother, they saw me kissing a guy that I was sexually active. And I honestly was not, because my grandmother always told me and my sister if we ever got pregnant, she was going to put us out the house. So I was even scared to look in the eyes of a boy at the age of 12 because she drilled this into our head. We were like so conditioned. And I remember her taking us to the health department, and we had our first pap smears, and from there, I mean, it got even worse, to where it shifted from there into my me just confiding in boys after boys. My first domestic violence relationship was the age of 16, and I just shifted from relationship to relationship, dealing with different guys, trying to find love when not knowing that love had resided in me all of this time. And it was only 5 years ago, after leaving my children's father for the eighth time, that I found who I was. And that's when my healing process began.
Wow, Angel. That is so, so amazing that you got out of those domestic violence relationships and you've been out of them for 5 years now, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
See, that's where the healing starts. Sometimes, people say you look for love in the wrong places. That's not what it is. It's you when you are taught this is love, for someone to beat you, so because you knew that they took you in because your father murdered your mother. So you're taught, you're getting beatings, but you're still in the home, even though it was a horror show, because you and your sister were abused day after day after day. And then you were abused for things that you did months ago because an uncle came to visit and your grandmother, like, well, she did this and they did this. And then you getting re traumatized again for that same incident.
Yes.
So now you said 5 children,
Mm-hmm.
4 with your abuser. Um, is he active in their life, or once you cut off the relationship, he cut the children off?
Well, when we were together, he wasn't active in their life. Then I was. It was just me. Having children by him back to back, trying to get him to be a father. And I think with him being so broken, he didn't know how to be a father. And so, with that being said, I felt like I was single the entire time I was married. But I was so broken, so lost, so miserable. I couldn't see any of that for so many years because I was so conditioned for so many years from a baby, from a child and up. So he wasn't as he wasn't active as he should have been as a father in their life. He did the normal things like cooking and cleaning and at times, paying the small bills, but I was the breadwinner. So basically I paid all the bills. I made sure that my children had the things that they needed for school and the shoes, the clothing, haircuts, all of that. Majority, I would say 99% of the time, that was me doing that. Even when it came to Christmas, I remember putting both of our names on their Christmas gifts just to make it seem like their father has played a part, but he really didn't. And now that I left, no, he has not been active in their life at all. As a matter of fact, my children haven't seen their dad probably one or two times in the past 5 years, and that's because he was hospitalized. And so I found out that he was in the hospital and I enforced us coming to see him. But if it wasn't for that, I don't even think we would have had the opportunity to see him. So he's not active at all in their lives.
So, not only, Angel, are you building a business, but also you're raising five children on your own.
Yes. So I have two that are now adults. One is 24. She has her own business now. She's the CEO of her own business. My 22-year-old son, oh, I'm so attached to my children. He just was approved for his own house. So he just recently moved out. And so I am raising my other three children who are still minors. They're teenagers. And so I am raising them in school full time, finishing up my master's in clinical mental health counseling. And yes, I have launched my business When Angel Speaks.
Can you tell us a little bit about your focus with Angel Speaks? What is the business going to be about? What population are you going to serve?
So when Angel speaks, what that means is Angel speaks. I'm now speaking. You are hearing the truth from my mouth, raw and uncut. But what that also means is there are a lot of angels out here like me that need to speak. So I am going to be that inspirational global voice to help them unmute their voices and come out of silence so that they can begin to walk into their purpose in their breakthrough. So that's what that means. So I don't have actual audience where I'm just focused on women and girls and here in the state where I live in, this is a global issue. This is a global issue with generational traumas and generational curses and mental health and childhood abuse and domestic violence. All of this is a global issue. And it's time for us to come out of the silence and be able to break these things that have had us hindered for so long.
I love the unmute part because as a social worker, and I've been working in the field for 17 years, people don't want to speak. And a lot of that comes from children need to be seen and not heard. So, as children, I grew up in the 70s, we were taught not to speak. Seen, yes, look at me, but don't speak. Or what goes on in this house stays in this house.
Yes.
And the reason why those were taught to us in those 70s, I think it probably started before the 70s, is because something was going on in the house.
Yes.
Because you wouldn't, do you tell your children to this day what goes on in this house, stay in this house, or do you allow your children to have a voice?
And you know what? A lot because of my upbringing initially, I have to speak. Yes, I used to tell my children what goes on in this house stays in this house because you have to look at it. There were things going on in the house of what my children father was doing to me. So yes, but I had to look at it. My children had to open my eyes. Mom, we don't have a voice. We can't say anything to you that's wrong. And I say this to every parent. You have to allow your children to have a voice. If we continue to mute our children's voices because of what is going on in the house and we know that it's not right, it will affect your children mentally, emotionally, and even physically because it affected mine. And so as I begin my healing process, my children began their healing process. I have the best relationship with them. But it was when I allowed them to speak and tell me every single thing that was bothering them. And it was me not being the mother that I should have been. And you know what I did? I swallowed every pride that I had because my children were absolutely right. Because I was a woman broken with a hollow soul and didn't know how to love because it was never taught to me. I was instilling that same generational trauma and curse into my children. But when I told them to speak their voice to me, unmute their voice and speak their truth, it is when they spoke the truth that my eyes spiritually began to open and know that it was time for me to break free. Because if I did not break myself free, if I did not shout out to God that I was tired of being tired, then the ripple effect would have happened to my children, my children's children, and my children's children's children. Somebody somewhere has to break that curse. And the curse breaker began with me because I allowed my children to have a voice and I allowed my children to tell me, where did mom go wrong?
Wow. If I can say, I hope everyone heard this because we have to unmute our children. That's so important. We got to stop saying what goes on in this house stays in this house because that was said to some of us because the household wasn't great. So we knew when we went out in public, we said nothing. How you doing? Fine. We kept it. Everything good? Yes. And it wasn't good. Because like you said, your family were big in the community you guys grew up in. There were streets named after family members. But when you guys went behind that closed door, it was a horror story.
Exactly. Exactly. It was a horror story. And you know, another thing that helped me as I began to heal, I wanted to get to the root of what
Mhm.
caused all of this, even going back to my childhood. What was the root of this domestic violence and childhood abuse? Then I had to say to myself, look at my mom. I was told my mom was dating my dad in high school. I was told my family never heard of him. I assumed because they knew what my dad was doing to my mom. But why did she resort to a man that she knew was hitting on her? Why did she stay and get pregnant? She didn't have confidence. She didn't have self-esteem. Why did my grandfather always come over and hit on my grandmother? He used to be married to her. It was a reason why they divorced. Why did my grandmother divorce my grandfather? And the domestic violence that he would used to do to her when he come over, that showed it. She had no
Mhm.
confidence and self-esteem. She confided in a man, you know, he was well known in the city where we were from. And I can only imagine my great grandmother probably went through the same thing because if that was the case, my grandmother would not have been with a man who has so many children, children that came out of the woodworks that even my grandmother didn't even know anything about until some of them just within the past 10 to 15 years. So it's been a generational curse. You got to get to the root of the thing so that you can break that curse. You know, you've got
Mhm.
to get to the root of it. So, you know, that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
That's
Yeah.
right. How is your sister? How is she?
You know what? I haven't talked to my sister in years. We both were broken. And every time I would talk to my sister, I would lash out at her. And she would lash out at me and we wouldn't speak. So we actually, my bond with my sister and my brother, it's just like meeting a stranger because of the things that happen in our family. Because we grew up, you know, feeling just completely left out, like they called her, the worst child because she looked so much like our father. And that's why I feel like my family really did her the way that they did her, because she looks identical to our father. Me, I look identical to my mother. And with my brother, because it wasn't his actual father, he had a separate father than us. He got treated like the royal king. And to this day, my family even treats his daughters like they're the royal princess. And we have no valid connection between me and my sister. We have no true root connection with our family, even when it comes to my children. They don't know my family like that. So my relationship with my sister and my brother is like at a distance. We don't have a relationship. It's more like associates, strangers, or just when you see someone, you speak and you hold a conversation and you keep it moving. But I have no relationship with my sister nor my brother.
And that is because they're so broken. You do
Yeah.
know that because they went through the same thing you went through. Even if your brother didn't get the punishment you and your sister gotten, but he was
Mhm.
there and he
Mhm.
saw. And then sometimes what happens is it's either we meet abusers or we become abusers because that's what was
Mhm.
taught.
Yep. And you're
The lessons learned as a child is what you bring into your
yes.
adulthood.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And that's how I saw it all. Everything that I went through with these domestic violence relationships, they stem from childhood abuse. Everything that I went through as a child. I was never taught the meaning of LOVE. I was never taught the meaning of how a girl should always keep her head raised high, how she should always know that she's confident, how she should always know that she's beautiful and bold, and her self-esteem should always remain high because she is who God says she is. I was never taught that. But for some reason, I still continue my head held high through everything that I went through. I still continue to stand strong with my crown, even though it may have tilted, it was still on top of my head because God told me I'm still strong. And He never left me, neither did He forsaken me. And that's why I'm still standing. And that is why when angel speaks, my voice can be heard.
Your voice is heard and loud and clear. And guess what? We want everybody to unmute. Man, woman, child, unmute yourself.
Absolutely.
Unmute. I love that. And I love that that's the focus of your agency to be. When you become a global speaker, we
Yeah.
speaking all of that, you're going to be a global speaker, and your focus is on muting people. And I never heard that. We always tell people talk it out, but unmute yourself because you've been muted
Yeah.
so long. That hits so deep for me, and I appreciate this interview because in certain areas of my life I am muted.
Hmm.
I share a lot. My journey is real, but when I'm sitting here speaking to you, I'm saying to myself, I never shared that. Why? Because
That
I'm
is,
muted in that
yep.
area
Uh,
until you just open that
mhm.
Pandora's box. Because we have so many Pandora's boxes within ourselves. I always tell people, you may be speaking about this, but you're holding this in because you don't want to open that box because that box comes with a feeling.
Exactly.
And some of us don't want to feel those feelings.
Exactly.
So I want to thank you. How can people contact you, Angel? Because I'm going to be honest. This podcast is in about 43 states and 22 countries. If someone wanted to reach out to you because they're struggling with being muted, like I said, I found an area where I'm muted at, and I'm going to speak about it on one of my lives. But where can they contact you?
So they can find me on social media. I am on social media, and under Instagram, you can find me at underscore when angel speaks. On Facebook, you can find me at when angel speaks. You may also reach me at contact at whenangelspeaks.com. My website will be launching the first week of March, so I'm so excited about that. And those are the ways that you can reach me. So When Angel Speaks on Facebook _ When Angel Speaks, and contact at whenangelspeaks.com currently. And then when my website launches the first week of March, my website will be www.whenangelspeaks.com. And so I have a lot of great things that I will have on my website, a lot of great things that are launching, and I am here to share my story to help those break free and unmute their voices. And also, I'm launching a book very soon, so that will be available for everyone to tap into and be able to see more about what has transpired in my life and how I turned my pain into my victory.
Amen. And we will be purchasing your book. So please, keep us posted when it comes out, the launch date of the book, because we want to know. Before we end this podcast, Angel, what would you like to tell the world or share with the world who's listening to this
So, what I
podcast?
would like to tell everyone, anybody that's going through something, be encouraged. Know that you are more than enough. And it is okay to cry. It is okay to not be okay because I was once in those shoes. Forgive yourself first and forgive those who have wronged you. Know that the process is not overnight. Know that you will also have triggers, but never self doubt what God has for you because you are vulnerably bold, beautiful, and bodacious to be able to even shift into becoming successful by walking through your purpose of your breakthrough. So be encouraged, and I am here to be that voice for everyone who needs that voice to be able to be unmuted.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Angel, and this podcast for joining us. We want to thank you. And I know for a fact your story is going to help millions to unmute themselves. So thank you for joining
Thank you for
us.
having me.